So imagine you're floating in the waters off the coast of Fiji on a mega huge yacht nearly as long as a football field. There's floors of delicate marble, a lobster tank, a pizza oven, a mosaic tiled pool, and even a Fabergé egg.
And as you pull in to dock in Fiji, U.S. federal agents storm aboard and arrest you because it turns out you are a Russian oligarch and you paid for this $300 million super yacht with stolen money.
And this is what really happened to Suleiman Kirimov, one of the richest men in Russia with a net worth of $16 billion and suspicious ties to the Kremlin. And his capture was thanks to a small, pretty unknown DOJ task force called KleptoCapture.
And this was established in 2022 right after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, basically to target oligarchs close to Putin and enforce Russian sanctions. So, to identify and capture, KleptoCapture, yachts and penthouses and private jets.
And the US has been slowly issuing sanctions against these Russian billionaires that have political ties for decades. But this task force, which Biden actually announced during his 2022 State of the Union, was created to confiscate their wealth, sell their assets, and then send the profits to Ukraine to help fund the war.
And it was an extension of a program called Kleptocracy Asset Recovery Initiative, which we'll just call CARI, which basically did the same thing, but for kleptocracies all around the world, with the goal of returning whatever money it can recover to the country of origin.
And these initiatives recovered billions of dollars, but more importantly, we're basically sending a message to shady governments and criminal organizations saying that if you skirt the law, no matter how powerful you are, the US will send its best agents after you and prosecute you. So these programs were kind of on the rise until one random day during Trump's first month in office, the DOJ put out a long memo and buried on the fourth page in 2 sentences, CARI and KleptoCapture were disbanded.
And that was really shocking and concerning to the national security community for many reasons, one of which because several close Trump allies had previously been implicated by kleptocracy works. So, Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was convicted of tax and bank fraud after an investigation led by the kleptocracy team, and their work stifled a lucrative development deal by Steve Witkoff, who we know is Trump's special envoy to the Middle East and unofficially Russia.
And of course, the DOJ memo didn't mention any of that. We also found that Elliot Broidy, a Republican Party fundraiser who helped gather really big donors for Trump's 2016 campaign, was engaging in an illegal lobbying campaign to get the US government to drop a really big CARI investigation of Malaysian fraud. And Trump actually ended up pardoning him.
That Malaysian case was actually CARI's biggest bust ever. They recovered a total of $1.7 billion in stolen assets from a Malaysian government fund that was created to literally promote economic development and improve the well-being of Malaysian people. But instead, CARI found that these funds were being misappropriated by high-level officials.
Which is so disgusting. These funds were supposed to help people, but instead they were used to buy luxury homes in Beverly Hills, New York, and London, a 300-foot super yacht, fine art by Monet and Van Gogh, and even the movie production that made The Wolf of Wall Street.
Random. And that's just one of many CARI recovery missions. They also brought a case against the son of Equatorial Guinea's president/dictator, Mbasogo.
And he's been the dictator since 1982, which is forever. And according to Forbes, he's one of the wealthiest heads of state in the world.
Well, CARI found that his son used his position to loot more than $300 million from the country, which he used to purchase a Malibu mansion, a Ferrari, 6 life-size Michael Jackson statues. He's a huge MJ fan. But ultimately, his son reached a settlement with the U.S. to sell everything, except he was able to keep Jackson's famous white crystal glove and his private jet. So he's still living large.
And the list goes on. They've busted relatives of the Honduran president, Bangladeshi cricket organizer, and even the former dictator of Nigeria. And the reason that we think this story is important is because through our research, we found that these DOJ kleptocracy groups really helped create the blueprint in targeting these high-profile political criminals and then seizing their assets. And that's really difficult, especially when it comes to seizing billions in offshore accounts, which is a majority of these cases.
Yeah, we saw the offshore world described as a constellation of territories and nations operating with the same general aim of helping wealthy people move and hide their money. And we all know about Switzerland and the Cayman Islands for being these famous tax havens. But you might not know Hong Kong, Dubai, the Isle of Man, and surprisingly South Dakota are also.
And because these accounts are all over the world, these klepto groups have to like build cases that link them to the US in order to have like the authority to seize them. So with the yacht example we mentioned at the beginning, they found that $1.3 million were spent on the boat's upkeep through US banks, and that's what gave them the grounds to seize what was apparently one of the most expensive yachts in the world.
So beyond the speculation that Trump was kind of helping his wealthy friends by disbanding these initiatives, why else would he want to shut them down? Well, when Pam Bondi announced the end of it, she said it was to refocus DOJ staff and resources on the total elimination of drug cartels.
Which was confusing to us because a lot of these shell companies that were targeted by Kerry and registered in the US were used to traffic drugs like fentanyl and then launder hundreds of millions in proceeds. So in one case, a major Chinese synthetic opioid trafficking gang used companies registered in Massachusetts to ship fentanyl to US states.
Right, so it's actually counterproductive. The Guardian wrote, "It's hard to overstate how central Washington has been to global efforts to tackle corruption, financial crime, and kleptocracy. It invented the idea of fighting money laundering, and its prosecutions and indictments have been more ambitious than ever seen."
But of course, so much was like happening in the world in Trump's first month of presidency when Kerry was disbanded. So it kind of got swept under the rug. So we spoke to Annalise Burkhart, who's the lead on asset recovery work for Transparency International, which is the world's largest coalition against corruption.
Okay, so Annalise, our first question before Kerry was disbanded earlier this year, what exactly did it work on and why was its work so important?
So, like, let's say you have a former prime minister or the head of a state-owned enterprise in another country, and they're involved in a scheme where they're either receiving bribes from illegally awarding a contract to a company that they're connected to, or they're just straight up siphoning off public funds. A lot of time that money winds up in the United States. And like when people think of havens for dirty money, the islands always come to mind, you know, the like Cayman Islands or the Bahamas. But in reality, the easiest place to launder dirty money has historically been the United States. This has just been due to a variety of gaps in our anti-money laundering framework. So in simple terms, Kerry, this was the unit. These are the guys who were going after the yachts. They were going after the penthouses, the luxury cars, watches, you name it. Any and all assets, including cash just sitting in bank accounts, moved through the US financial system that had been illicitly acquired. A lot of times, you know, they wouldn't want to return money because it could be at risk of getting stolen again if there's a country that doesn't have like the proper safeguards in place, or even like, you know, what the money is going to be used for once it's returned.
We're assuming it's difficult to navigate. How did Kerry kind of find the proper framework to do that and actually prosecute these people when so much international jurisdiction is involved?
There is a lot of international cooperation, like necessary to even get these cases jump started. Kerry, I mean, they're full of, you know, trained individuals who have been working on financial crime. They work with a bunch of other federal agencies, including the FBI. The FBI has an international corruption unit, and then also Homeland Security investigations at the Department of Homeland Security. Sometimes, you know, these cases get started from whistleblowers, leaks, investigative journalists.
And so if we're talking about kind of the big picture impact of these kleptocracy programs, do you think they changed the way that these crimes are targeted and ultimately prosecuted? Like, did they find a template that works?
Yeah, definitely. Especially like all the different task forces set up after Russia's invasion into Ukraine in 2022, like KleptoCapture. At the EU level, they had like the freeze and seize, and then there was also REPO, Russian elites, proxies, and oligarchs task force, and that was the G7, and then Australia. So you had a bunch of these like bodies formed. I think it really helps streamline communication, and so the template is down for what it looks like to seize an asset.
And so it's so clear to us, at least, why these programs were so important. Just to ask the obvious question, why did the Trump administration disband it?
That's a really great question. Your guess is probably as good as mine. I think like in the early days of the administration, there was, you know, the sentiment of just like, let's cut everything that doesn't seem to have an immediate direct net benefit. Then ramifications of cutting a program like this probably was not obvious to folks like just coming into the administration. Around the same time when they announced that this would be disbanded, the Department of Justice also said that they were going to be pausing enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is like the US's landmark anti-bribery law. It was passed in 1977, and it's kind of served as like a model anti-bribery law for governments around the world. So this was a huge, like really concerning setback. But actually, just this past week, they announced that they were going to be resuming enforcement of the FCPA. It's still kind of unclear to see what that will look like.
In like the memo where the DOJ was disbanding Kerry, we saw that their rationalization was kind of because they wanted more money and resources to combat like drug cartels. Does that make sense to you that they're kind of shutting all of these down to like pool all of their resources for something else?
Yeah, I don't think those two things are like it's not mutually exclusive. It's been kind of frustrating to see that messaging, honestly, because I think if the administration really wanted to get serious about tackling like the fentanyl crisis here in America and going after these like transnational criminal organizations, TCOs, and cartels that they talk about, they should focus more on strengthening the United States' anti-money laundering framework and not weakening it. I mean, with also the new like golden visa program that we're offering and sort of the evolving nature of the US's relations with Russia right now, I think that disbanding KleptoCapture was sort of like sending probably a friendly signal to Russia because so much of what KleptoCapture was a it was a signal, you know, that we were willing, able, and capable to go after these kinds of assets, that we were going to support Ukraine in this war. And now we're just kind of seeing a full like draw out of that space.